There are almost 200 countries in the world today, and all of them have clearly defined territory in the forms of borders, right? Well, not really. While it is true for the vast majority of countries, some states don't get along too well with their neighbors or just can't agree on where the borders should be. Hence, border disputes. And before you ask, no, I'm not gonna talk about border conflicts like Israel and Palestine, Russia and Ukraine, Armenia and Azerbaijan, or India and Pakistan, cause this is A. controversial, B. boring, and C. common knowledge. In this video, I'm gonna focus on the more obscure border disputes, some of which you mightn't even know exist. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this tour around the world. Now, this is the moment in the video when I pause for a second to say thank you to those who are sticking with me and watch my videos. Remember, if you like what you see and want to help the channel grow, like the video and click that subscribe button. It would really help me out. You can also share it among your friends so more people could discover the channel. No, seriously, my analytics are crying, please send help. You can also follow me on social media, links in the description down below. And now, back to the video. Let's start in Africa and more specifically in Morocco. To the south of the country lies the territory known as Western Sahara, most of which is occupied by Morocco, while a small chunk in the desert is in control of the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic. So, how do we get there? After the Spanish left the area in 1975, it was partitioned between Morocco and Mauritania. At the same time, however, the Polisario Front was formed, a rebel liberation movement of the Sahrawi people, which aimed to control the entirety of Western Sahara. In 1979, after Mauritania withdrew from the territory, Morocco annexed the entirety of Western Sahara. However, both remained at war until 1991, with the then front lines being a de facto border, on which Morocco constructed a wall. Both countries still claim the entirety of Western Sahara as their own, yet only the US recognizes the Moroccan claim. Moving east, we find Sudan, which has two territorial disputes. The first one being with Egypt over the Halaib Triangle. This one traces back to colonial times when Sudan was a condominium of the UK and Egypt called Anglo-Egyptian Sudan. An agreement between UK and Egypt defined the Sudanese territory as all the territories south of the 22nd parallel of latitude, which gave Egypt the Halaib territory. However, later that year, some changes were made to the agreement, which transferred some land from Egypt to Sudan, and an administrative boundary was drawn in 1902. After both countries became independent, they basically claim whichever border gave them the most land. That also means nobody lays claim to a territory called Bir Tawil, making it terra nullius. On the other side of Sudan lies South Sudan, and on the border of these two countries lies the Abyei area, which is administered by both of them. The dispute can be traced back to the Second Sudanese Civil War and its peace treaty in 2002, which gave Abyei to the northern part of Sudan, while the South Sudanese side pushed for a self-determination referendum for the region. The matter went to international arbitration, with the court in The Hague ordering to redraw the borders of Abyei. After the independence referendum in South Sudan, Sudanese forces invaded Abyei, although withdrew shortly after. Nowadays, the area is occupied by peacekeeping forces to prevent each side from invading again. The Ethiopia-Somalia conflict is a violent one, and another one caused by colonialism. After the partition of the Somali region after World War II, which ceded Hod and Ogaden regions to Ethiopia, disagreements arose between the two. Both Ethiopia and Somalia claimed sovereignty over Ogaden, with Somalia's claim being based on the idea of Greater Somalia, uniting all Somali people under one state. This led to several wars, including the 1977 Ogaden War, and both countries engaged in skirmishes on the border as recently as 2009. Moving to Asia, and all of the three disputes here are linked to China. The first one being with India over Arunachal Pradesh, or South Tibet as it's known in China. And this one was caused by, surprise surprise, the British. The border between the two was established at the Simla Convention in 1914, and was called the McMahon Line. Britain and Tibet signed the accord, however China did not, stating that Tibet was not an independent country and therefore couldn't sign treaties, making the Simla Accord and therefore the border null and void. Fast forward 48 years, and the now communist China invaded the territory and occupied it for a short period of time, before withdrawing back to the McMahon Line. Arunachal Pradesh was granted statehood in India in 1987, a status widely recognized by the international community except for China. The second Chinese dispute brings us east to Japan and the Senkaku Islands. The Japanese landed on the archipelago in 1895, and it has been under Japanese control ever since. However, in the late 1970s, evidence of oil reserves in the East China Sea surfaced, and both China and Taiwan came knocking. The Chinese view is that they discovered the islands in 1372 and made part of the Qing dynasty in 1534. China saw Japan's arrival as an imperial conquest that has never been returned. Japan, meanwhile, claims to have found the islands as terra nullius, meaning the islands did not belong to any country and were free to grab. For our third dispute, we move south to... Oh no. So, these are the Spratly Islands, and they're claimed by 6 countries. Yes, you heard me right, 6. China, Taiwan, Thailand, Malaysia, Brunei, and the Philippines all lay claim to the islands, and all 6 have military bases to enforce their claims. But why? Why do they care about uninhabited islands? The answer is simple. The South China Sea is probably the most important maritime trading route in the world, especially for China. And remember that 200 nautical miles of EEZ? Whoever controls the islands controls basically the entire trade. And even though the claims of some countries are small, like Brunei's, China and Taiwan both claim all the islands. In addition, the area is rich in fish. About 12 million tons of fish are caught in the sea each year. That's where the EEZ comes into play again. Whoever has the EEZ has exclusive fishing rights. Such is the importance of the islands that 6 countries are fighting over it. Moving across the Pacific to Central and South America, and the first dispute we can find is between Belize and Guatemala. And guess what? It's the British fault again. Seriously, name a part of the world where the British haven't caused some kind of dispute. I'll wait. Throughout the 1700s, Britain and Spain signed a series of treaties confirming Spain's ownership of modern-day Guatemala and Belize. However, British settlers could use the land in Belize. After Guatemala became Guatemala and not Spain, they insisted on claiming the territory of modern-day Belize as their own. In 1859, Guatemala and Britain signed the Huayc-Aythinena Treaty, in which Guatemala recognized British sovereignty over the disputed land, which eventually became British Honduras. In 1949, Guatemala renewed their claims on the territory and claimed the treaty to be void. British Honduras gained independence as Belize in 1981, which Guatemala recognized. However, in 1991 they renewed their claims again, although this time only on the southern half of Belize. Both sides stationed troops near the border, and as of now, the matter is discussed in the International Court of Justice. Moving down south, we find a dispute between Venezuela and Guyana over the area known as Guyana Essequiba. It's quite a big chunk of land west of the Essequibo River, controlled by Guyana but claimed by Venezuela. And no prize for guessing where that dispute originates from. Yes, Britain and Spain, I'm looking at you. This carried over to Britain and Venezuela, the latter being very clear that the territory is theirs. In the 19th century, surveyors drew the Schomburg Line, which was the boundary recognized by the British and nowadays Guyana. A few years later, Venezuela declared the boundary to be the Essequibo River, which the other side refused to accept. This dispute led to international arbitration from the US, who in 1896 set up a tribunal to decide the border. 3 years later, the verdict was announced and most of the Schomburg Line was to remain the frontier between Venezuela and Britain. Venezuela declared the verdict null and void, which eventually led to the Geneva Agreement in 1966. Signed as a temporary agreement to come up to a permanent solution, it retained the 1899 status quo. However, it opened up to a route to negotiations between Venezuela and the now independent Guyana. The last mess in South America caused by the British is on the other side of Guyana, on the border with Suriname. This one dates back to the 1814 Anglo-Dutch Treaty, which set the border between Britain and the Netherlands in South America on the Corentyne River. In 1840, surveyors determined the source of Corentyne to be the Kutari River, and the border was drawn along that river. In 1871, however, surveyors determining the exact course of the border discovered the new river or Upper Corentyne, which is also a source of Corentyne, and thus the dispute over the Tigray area was born, with both countries claiming whatever portion of land gave them the most territory. The 1899 tribunal awarded the area to British Guyana, a verdict which Dutch and later Suriname never accepted. Nowadays the area is empty, except for a Guyanese military base to assert control for the area. One continent left to go, Europe. The first dispute is relatively tame, so I'll keep it short. The town of Olivenza, currently under Spanish control, is claimed by Portugal. The town had been under Portuguese control between 1297 and 1801, when it was seized by the Spanish and ceded to them under the Treaty of Badajoz, which Portugal considers to be null and void. The dispute remained silent, however, and in 1977 the two countries signed a treaty respecting each other's territorial integrity. The last two disputes concern Croatia. Let's start with the simpler one, with Serbia. The first border between the two was established in 1699 between the Kingdom of Slavonia, part of Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire, with the frontier being on the Danube River. Disputes arose as the river changed its course. Croatia states that the border should remain where it was originally, while Serbia insists that the border should change with the course of the river. This leads to small pockets of land on the left bank claimed by both countries and small pockets of land on the right bank claimed by neither country. One of these unclaimed pockets even became a micronation known as Liberland. The last dispute in this video brings us to the other side of Croatia, to the border with Slovenia, where both countries claim sovereignty over the Gulf of Piran. After both countries gained independence, Slovenia proposed to draw the border in the middle of the Gulf, however quickly changed its mind and claimed the Gulf in its entirety. Their claims are based on Article 15 of the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, more specifically the second sentence about historic title or other special circumstances. Slovenia claims the right to access international waters as they had prior access as Yugoslavia. In 2001, both sides negotiated the Drnovšek-Račan Agreement, which gave Slovenia a corridor to access international waters. Slovenia ratified the agreement, however Croatia did not. In 2007, the prime ministers of both countries reached an agreement to solve the dispute in the ICJ. However, this was met with huge disapproval from Slovenian politicians, and Slovenia eventually pulled out of the agreement. Slovenia went as far as to block Croatia's accession to the EU if the dispute wasn't resolved. In 2011, the matter went to international arbitration, with the verdict being announced in 2017. The tribunal concluded that the boundary in the bay is to follow a line drawn to join the end of the land boundary in the mouth of the Dragonia River to a point on the closing line of the bay, which is at a distance from Cape Madoria that is 3 times the distance from the same point to Cape Savudrija. Slovenia accepted the verdict, however Croatia did not. So, to quickly recap this video, not all countries are willing to cooperate with each other when it comes to disputed borders. Wars, skirmishes and political standoffs in general are a common occurrence, and it doesn't look like it's going to change in the near future. So, Thank you all for watching, and special thanks to the British Empire for making this video possible by creating more than half of the current border disputes in the world.